Hi there, and welcome to Universal Recaps. Today, I'll tell you about a movie from 2020 called Voyagers. In the film, the Earth is in bad shape, so scientists in the year 2063 search for a new planet where people can live. They find one, and a woman explains on screen that it's the place we can move to. She also mentions that we need to send a scouting mission there. The trip to the new planet will take 86 years, so the crew on the mission will have to have kids on the spaceship. The third generation will be the ones to reach the new planet. These crew members are specially made on Earth by mixing the genes of really smart scientists. There's a man, Richard, who explains why this plan makes sense and why they need to train kids just for this mission. They're trying to figure out when the crew should leave. If the crew is younger, they can save resources for longer, but Richard is worried they might not be ready to handle space travel on their own. Later, Richard goes into a place where the kid crew is growing up, and he wears protective gear. He goes into the rooms where they live, and when they see him, they get really happy. Richard checks on how they're doing with their learning, and then he tucks in Christopher, Sela, and Zach. Zach tells Richard that he's scared, but Richard reassures him and says he's safe. The following day, Richard talks to a woman in charge of the mission. He suggests that he should go with the children to take care of them and help with the mission. If he joins, they can launch the mission in 4 years instead of 7. So, they launch the mission with Richard leading it. They board a ship called Humanitas and get settled in. Before leaving, Richard takes one last look at Earth. 10 years later, the children have grown into adults. They start their day on the ship, going through a routine like robots. They drink a blue liquid, and Christopher and Zach listen to classical music. Sela walks through the ship and looks out into space. Later, she talks to Richard, saying that the crew's lives don't seem important. Richard tries to comfort her by showing pictures of his grandparents and explaining that securing the future is crucial. That night, Christopher can't sleep, so he listens to the sounds of the ship. The next day, Richard and Christopher check the plants in the hydroponics bay. Christopher sees a message about water toxicity and asks Richard about it, thinking there might be an issue with the way they process urine. But Richard dismisses his concerns and seems skeptical. Later, Christopher and Zach discuss an ingredient called T56J, and they wonder why there's limited information about it. During the night, Christopher and Zach decide to investigate further. Christopher manages to bypass a security system and discovers that the chemical ingredient they found is in the blue liquid they've been drinking. Zach initially thinks it's a digestion aid, but they realize it has other effects, making them less interested in things and reducing their pleasure response. Essentially, they're being drugged to keep them calm and prevent them from naturally having children and overpopulating the ship. So, Christopher and Zach stop drinking the blue liquid. Later, they share this discovery with 2 others, Kai and Julie, and also reveal information about a hidden compartment on the ship. Christopher then has a session with Richard and confronts him about the lies. He specifically mentions the unmarked compartment, Pod 23. Richard suggests that the mission might have its reasons for lying and that the pod could be meant for the 3rd generation. After the session, Richard sends a message to Earth asking if he can be honest with the crew so they don't lose faith in him, but it will take some time for the message to reach Earth. The next day, while waiting in line with Sela, Christopher has a daydream about her. During lunch, he keeps looking at her, and Zach notices that Sela has changed. When Zach tries to approach her, Richard intervenes, reminding them of the rules. In the gym, Christopher and Zach start fighting more intensely, raising questions among the others about what's happened. Christopher and Zach start experiencing the effects of not taking the drug, becoming more aware of the ship's sound. They go to an observation room and encounter another crew member. The 3 of them discuss what might be causing these strange noises, and the crew member suggests it could be some kind of alien life form. Meanwhile, Sela and Richard are in Richard's office, where he shows her dried plants from Earth. Zach and Christopher overhear their conversation and approach the room. Zach becomes jealous when he sees Richard touching Sela's shoulder. They lose contact with Earth, and Richard informs them that they need to fix their transmitter. Zach volunteers to go with him, while the others continue their roles on the ship. As preparations are underway, Zach approaches Sela again. She informs him about the suit he'll be wearing, and he starts behaving inappropriately, touching her without consent. Richard intervenes, trying to figure out what's happening, but Zach runs away. While searching for Zach, Richard encounters Phoebe, who tells him that Zach has stopped taking the blue. Later, he runs into Christopher and discovers that he, too, has stopped taking the drug. Richard and Christopher have a heated argument, but Richard explains that the drug was meant to prevent the kind of behavior exhibited by Zach. He asks Christopher for help in fixing the transmitter, with the condition that when it's operational, Christopher will support him in raising objections to mission control. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew is in their designated positions on the ship, preparing for a spacewalk. Zach heads to the systems room, while Richard and Christopher venture outside the ship. Christopher begins to experience unusual sensation, prompting Richard to keep a close eye on him. Richard successfully repairs one part of the transmitter and moves on to the second one. Inside the ship, the mysterious noises return, making the crew increasingly restless. They check to see if there's anything outside the ship, and suddenly, something appears on the screen next to Richard and Christopher. It injures Richard and propels him away from the ship. The ship also experiences a malfunction. Nobody knows what has just occurred, and there's a fire in the systems room. Christopher brings Richard back inside and they rush him to the medical area. Various errors start cropping up across the ship, affecting navigation and communication. The medical team, along with Sela, who is the chief medical officer, make a strenuous effort to revive Richard, but their attempts are unsuccessful. Sela sadly declares him dead. Later, the crew holds a meeting to discuss the recent events. They mention the strange creaking sound and one of the crew members recalls seeing something on the monitor when it happened, which appeared as though an alien force entered Richard. This revelation brings Phoebe to tears. Christopher offers words of comfort, encouraging the crew to stay together and assuring them that they'll get through this. As the ship's systems reboot, the crew attempts to check the surveillance archive to find out what happened to Richard. Unfortunately, all the footage has been deleted due to the fire in the systems room. They recognize the need to select a new chief officer. Zack expresses his desire to take on the role, but the others insist on having an election. Following the vote, Christopher is elected as the new chief officer. Zack, although jealous, congratulates him. Their first task is to repair the damage to the transmitter. Christopher assigns the entire crew to work on the other repairs caused by the fire on the ship. The surveillance system is last on the repair list so they can find out what happened to Richard. They hope that the drives containing the footage remain intact. Sela goes to Richard's office and starts going through his pictures and videos when Christopher arrives at the door. She mentions that she's supposed to delete his personal archive, even though she doesn't want to do it. They discuss the significance of parents as they reflect on Richard's personal items. Christopher asks Sela why Richard confided in her about his life, wondering if their relationship was more than just friendship. Sela clarifies that Richard was merely feeling lonely. They watch Richard's video diary, where he expresses his strong belief in the mission and his deep care for the crew. Meanwhile, Christopher searches for the crew and finds them in the cantina, frustrated that they're not at their designated posts. Zack explains that they're fixing the refrigerators to prevent food spoiling. They have a surplus of food that might go bad, so Zack suggests having a feast to celebrate Christopher becoming the new chief officer. They all partake in the meal, and Kai advises the crew not to drink the blue liquid, which they all decide to discard. As they continue looking through Richard's videos and sharing laughter, Christopher finds himself increasingly attracted to Sela. Zack, on the other hand, is drawn to Julie, and they share a physical connection, which doesn't go unnoticed by the rest of the crew. Later, the crew can be seen playing and having fun, engaging in playful fights, and exploring the ship. They continue to browse through Richard's personal archive. Sela discovers them in his quarters and asks them to leave, but they're reluctant. Zack, the last to exit, tells Sela that Richard is no longer there to protect her. Sela returns to the medical bay and grabs a scalpel. Christopher, worried about what Zack might do to Sela when he realizes she's in the med bay, arrives there before Zack can reach her. Zack enters the medical bay, and Christopher pretends that they are engaged in an intimate moment, causing Zack to leave. Sela, brandishing the scalpel, doesn't understand Christopher's intentions initially. When he reassures her that he's there to help, Sela insists that he should assist the rest of the crew because they are spiraling out of control. Christopher departs, and on his way, he encounters Zack, warning him to stay away from Sela. They both hear the strange crackling noise, as others on the ship also notice it. Kai witnesses Julie getting close to another crew member, prompting him to become enraged and physically confront the other crewmen, leading to a fight between them. In the cantina, Christopher tries to get the crew to behave, but they do not respond well to his efforts. Suddenly, the crewman whom Kai had fought with begins assaulting him with a tool. Christopher intervenes, stopping the fight. He instructs everyone to get Kai and the other crewmen medical attention and then convenes a meeting in the common room. During the meeting, Christopher emphasized the need to cease fighting and continue ship repairs. Zack challenges him, while others express concerns that working on the ship could jeopardize the mission's success. Christopher argues that future generations will benefit from their efforts. One crew member voices fear about the alien presence in the systems room, suggesting that Christopher brought it on board when Richard died. Phoebe proposes repairing the surveillance system to find out what happened, but Zack dismisses her and instructs Christopher to be quiet as well. Zack is no longer concerned with following the rules and tries to rally others to his side, arguing that Christopher is not the right leader. He believes he should take charge and attempts to persuade the rest of the crew to join his group, which he claims will be strong enough to confront any potential alien threat. Many crew members side with Zack, but some remain loyal to Christopher. The group aligned with Christopher's heads to the surveillance room to repair the system, worried that an alien might be there. Christopher enters first to investigate. Simultaneously, Zack and his followers explore the ship's hallways and reach the system's room. Unaware that Christopher has also been in the room, Zack and Kai venture deeper inside to search for the supposed alien. Those outside witness something unsettling happening in the room, and Zack and Kai rush out in fear, sealing the room behind them. Later, they inform the rest of their group that they were attacked by the alien. Meanwhile, Christopher takes the surveillance drive to Sela in the medical bay. They, along with a few others, review the footage and discover that it was Zack and Kai who killed Richard by electrocution and then fabricated the story about the alien. The group decided to keep this information confidential for the time being while they determine their next steps. Christopher and Sela hide the drive in her room and discuss Zack. Christopher believes that this is their true nature without the drug, but Sela disagrees, emphasizing that the two of them are different. Christopher expresses his concerns to Sela, worrying that the others might not care about the truth, and perhaps he doesn't care either. Sela urges him to stay with her, and they share an intimate moment together. In the morning, there's a knock on Sela's door, and it's Zack insisting that he'll come inside one way or another. When Sela and Christopher open the door, Zack and Kai invite them to another celebration in the cantina. Christopher's group arrives, with the others already eating. Zack invites them to join him for food. However, once they're seated, Zack stands up and declares himself the new chief officer. A dramatic turn of events occurs when Christopher stands up, accesses a monitor, and plays the footage from the incident. He reveals that Zack killed Richard, and there is no alien. Zack has been lying to them. Christopher suggests that Zack confine himself to his room while they consult the program and figure out their next steps. The crew becomes upset, and Zack eventually confesses, claiming he did it to protect them because the alien was inside Richard, and Christopher brought it on board. He convinces the others that the alien is hiding on the ship, inside one of them. Zack manipulates the crew into turning against one another, and they begin to fight. They suspect one crew member, who works in the med bay, of being the host of the alien and chase after him. Christopher follows, witnessing the brutal assault on the crewman. He then leads his group to a secure location on the ship, while Zack's group goes into the med bay and arms themselves. Christopher's group discusses their options, and some suggest giving up, believing they can't do anything at the moment. They consider joining Zack's group and later attempting to detain him since Zack's group possesses weapons while they do not. Sela realizes that Christopher knows about the hidden weapons on the ship in a secret compartment, and Christopher decides to go find them by himself. Christopher enters a compartment in search of the hidden weapons. After finally locating it, he struggles to open the compartment, triggering an alarm. Julie and another crew member hear the alarm and realize that Christopher is inside the compartment. They inform Zack about the situation. Christopher exits to retrieve tools to open the compartment, but upon his return, the other group is already dismantling the compartment. They open the secret compartment and discover the weapons. Kai believes the weapons are intended for the third generation, but Zack insists they are meant for them. Two members of Christopher's group express their desire to join Zack and his followers. Christopher, Sela, and Phoebe devise a plan to get close to Zack, with Christopher suggesting that he should kill him, a notion Phoebe doesn't approve of. Sela observes the other group's movements on a monitor and notices them approaching. In response, Sela orders a power cut in the room. As Zack's group arrives, Sela instructs her group not to resist. The others storm the room and seize them, but Sela intervenes while they attempt to take Christopher away. She requests to speak privately with Zack and pretends to want to join his group, walking up to him. However, Zack dismisses her with laughter, just as Phoebe appears, questioning the sanity of their actions and suggesting they can choose not to behave this way. But the group silences her, and Kai unexpectedly kills her, shocking everyone, including Zack. However, Zack quickly shifts the focus back to capturing Christopher. Christopher and Sela manage to escape, but the others hunt them throughout the ship. They hide in a vent, but the pursuers quickly determine their location. Zack shoots into the vent, while Julie warns him that he's destroying their food supply. Zack sends one of his men to check if they have been apprehended, but Christopher and Sela escape again. Suddenly, they come under fire, prompting them to search for weapons. In their frantic search for weapons, Christopher and Sela manage to find a fire extinguisher. When Kai enters the med bay, they use it to incapacitate him, unintentionally causing his death. Their escape is short-lived as Zack quickly catches up with them and opens fire. They rush into an airlock, and Christopher instructs Sela to put on a spacesuit. He covers the airlock's window. As Zack reaches the airlock, he shoots without hesitation. However, he's unexpectedly sucked out into space because the hatch to the outside has been opened. He grabs Sela and engages in a struggle to close the hatch, ultimately stabbing her with a knife. Christopher pushes Zack outside the hatch during their fight, but he too is pulled into space. Just as Zack attempts to close the hatch, Sela kicks him out of it. Sela anxiously searches for Christopher and waits for his return. She is surprised to see him grabbing onto the ship, holding on for his life. Christopher and Sela return to the ship, informing the crew that Zack is gone. They set aside their weapons. Sometime later, the entire crew is gathered for lunch in the cantina. Sela asks Christopher how they can ensure that such a horrifying event doesn't recur. They listen to some of Richard's recorded messages, in which he emphasizes that despite any hardships they encounter on the mission, those who endure are proof that humanity is worth saving. The crew decides to conduct another vote for a new leader, and this time, they choose Sela. Sela records a diary entry, expressing that they will vote on everything from that point forward and will continue to avoid the blue liquid. The crew works together in harmony, repairing the ship and moving forward as time passes. Sela becomes pregnant, and the baby is Christopher's. The child is born, and a few years later, the baby can be seen running through the ship and interacting with other children. These children grow up on the ship, while the first generation of crew members becomes elderly. After 86 years since the mission began, the Humanitas is shown floating in space and activating its drive to land on the alien planet. Both the older and younger generations of crew members look toward their new home on the unfamiliar planet, signifying the fulfillment of their mission. Subscribe to Universal Recaps and turn on notifications for regular updates. Give a thumbs up if you like our content.